Hey, welcome to the Dr. Luke channel. Today we're going to talk about chapter 33, the oh so numinous number 33 of the abridged Golden Bough. We're going to be talking about the gardens of Adonis. And you can tell that this is going to be a very long podcast. I had so much material for this. It's probably going to be either we're going to break this up into two parts or make a super podcast here. And you can tell that we have a different panel than usual. Of course, we have the lovely producer Jordan, but the illustrious Heidi from Unfiltered Rise podcast. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you guys again. Heidi Love, Unfiltered Rise. Anywhere you want to find me, I'm probably there. And today, I'm here in all my regalia.
Yeah, we've been wearing these the tinfoil hats, metaphorically and now physically for so long. It didn't even seem strange to me. By the way, it's tinfoil hat day. I enjoy dressing up for these now. Makes it more fun. I like to make learning fun.
Mm.
It's true.
Yeah,
Just like
it's
the
different.
IBM exhibit that we'll be
That's a great
talking about.
segue. Yeah, that's a
Oh,
great
yeah.
segue.
That's what they had to say about that.
Yeah. Well, I'll feed that into the introduction here when we talk about these subjects that are on the title card. We are going to be looking at the connections between Adonis and the Kennedys. Um, and some of the themes that came up when I was working on it this week were the connections between JFK and this La Pieta statue that was given to him by the Pope. This is a replica that was given to him by the Pope and was then a forerunner to the real thing being placed at the 1964 World's Fair. And the deeper I got into the 1964 World's Fair with its Unisphere, its IBM film Think in the ovoid pavilion that they had there, and the Apollo hardware, it became more obvious to me that there is something very alchemical about the fairgrounds itself.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps we'll highlight some of the importance that it has in pop culture, specifically in films with like Men in Black. Going to continue to look at Marilyn Monroe and her continuity with Aphrodite. Specifically, I want to look at her time working in a drone factory and what that symbolically may signal. I'm sorry. And I want to look at the timing of the JFK assassination. It happened just 3 days after he pardoned a turkey, and the funeral happened on Thanksgiving. And I think there is something calendrically very interesting about that. Similarly, something that I've overlooked in the analysis of the archetypal psychohistory of the space missions is the Mariner 2 program, which was one of the first successful space programs that happened during the Kennedy administration in 1962. You can see him here in the bottom left-hand corner. And this Mariner satellite or probe went to Venus. And now that makes so much more sense given what we know about Adonis and Aphrodite. I also want to look at the synchronization between early Christian rituals that stay with us today and the cult of Adonis. I have here the flowering of the cross, which now has a deeper meaning to me. It's one of my favorite things to do um, when I went to church as a child. And lastly, we'll perhaps close out with a look at the very first poem that Shakespeare ever published, called Venus and Adonis. So that's why we have the mannequin of him there. So this is just a sampling of what we're going to talk about. This is not exhaustive. If any of these conversations are interesting to you, stick around.
I'm so excited about the turkey. The details on the turkey segment blew my mind. So I can't wait to get there.
Now I have to look up some things because of some things that I know about the first Thanksgiving. So, yeah, I mean, this is why I love coming on these shows because it seems like there's ties backward every single time.
Oh, for sure.
And
For sure.
so the Sykes family, I don't know if you know about them. Do you know about them?
No.
I don't.
So Seixas, they were a very prominent JE, you fill in the last consonant family. I can't say it because I'll be in trouble. But it's not about that. It's just history. This is just history lesson, but for some reason it's weird. So I don't know. But he was the first one to give a Thanksgiving prayer at Thanksgiving with George Washington. He was one of his best buddies, but his son actually taught Joseph Smith Hebrew, even though he couldn't read or write English. That's fine. But anyway, I'm going to look into this because there's some
Very cool.
Rosicrucian ties and some other ties there, more than Mormonism.
Cool. Well, let's get into it if we shall.
Yeah.
I'd like to, before we get into the meat of the conversation, no pun intended there. I like to talk about things that are in the news and personal synchronicities with the materials that we talk about here on the podcast. So, Jordan, if you could progress to the next slide. So last time we talked about the alchemy of the 20th century and how I was becoming increasingly comfortable with the Trinity test being the Negretto, the moon landing being the Albedo, and the Kennedy assassination being the Rubetto. And for reasons that I detailed in last podcast, although I'm also building on them every single time. And I don't necessarily think I had a long conversation with my personal AI assistant this morning, and I'm really kind of distancing myself from Downard and Hoffman, and developing this idea that there's an archetypal layer that interacts with humans that perhaps want to tap in or harness it. I'll be talking about that in the coming weeks. But something that I noticed right after we finished talking about the importance of rose symbolism with the Rubetto stage and how it's all over JFK, for those who have been following along, I've really gotten into the show Gilmore Girls. And as soon as we ended the podcast, opened it up, and of course the main character is wearing this rose. And then also we looked at her car, which when I looked into what it actually is, it's a Lancer, a Dodge Lancer, which is important because we've been talking about the code name of JFK, who is also a Lancer. So I thought those synchronicities were interesting. But it opened up a portent into other alchemical works, and specifically Twin Peaks. And I got to thinking about how the coffee that is at the center of both Gilmore Girls and Twin Peaks could be a signaling of the putrefaction aspect of the Negretto stage. And when I thought about the color scheme of Twin Peaks in general, if I think about the diner scenes, it's black coffee, it's saucers, and it's cherry pie, right? And all three of those could coordinate to the different alchemical stages. And I think I've long scratched my head about why are shows that feature coffee prominently connected to alchemy in some ways. And I think this might, I don't want to say it's an open and shut case, but it resonates with me that just even how the coffee is served in a way, it looks, I don't know if we call them flasks or we call them, I guess we can call it a flask or something like that. It to me, it kind of symbolizes how the putrefaction stage occurs in alchemy. Not to mention you start to think about the scene where the fish is put into the percolator and what that might all mean and what fish symbolism is in Twin Peaks. So
that rose, as the Merovingians, right?
I don't know about the rose and Merovingians.
Oh yeah. This is a Templar thing. The rose.
Oh, well, you might have to connect the Merovingian and the Templar thing to me. I mean, obviously we talked about last time with the rose, and roses are often associated with initiation into the mysteries, hence the Rosy Cross philosophers, the Philosophorum Rosarium, which actually means rose garden, which was one of the first orders of business for JFK to build a rose garden.
The rose for the Merovingian line is that they continued, Mary Magdalene went on to have Jesus's child, and her womb is what they were actually protecting, aka the Grail. Even the shape of these flasks, right,
is very womb-like. Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So, if you've ever seen Onassis, which he plays into all this business, you ever see his original symbol? It's the same. It's a keyhole, basically, just like the Vatican from above.
You're talking about Aristotle Onassis?
Oh, I am. Yeah, Aristotle's great.
Yeah, I've talked about Aristotle a little bit. How does Aristotle fit into all this?
Aristotle Onassis. Just declassified CIA docs. That's it.
What?
Or FBI. Yep.
Okay.
FBI vault. Super nerded out on that one. Haven't done the episode yet because I went and bit off a little more than I can. I understand it, but to present it, right? Like when you get too much in your brain, that's where I'm at. But Onassis has a foundation that went on after his passing that continues to this day. Of course, he does. Like all of them do. And the original design is the keyhole, along with like the Templars. That's what they said they were guarding, right? Is Mary Magdalene, the posterity of the child, from Jesus Christ himself. And the Mormon, I know you don't love to talk about it, but they believe this. Joseph Smith said he was the perfected line of Jesus Christ himself.
Yeah.
So that's kind of fun. But like, it's more than that. The Merovingian rose is it's a big deal. Big deal.
All right, I have to look into it. I'll have to look into it. And by the way, it's not that I dislike talking about the Mormon stuff.
No, I know. I just don't want to make
know so much about it.
I always feel bad because I'm like, I know he has friends. I'm not ever trying to be. Yeah. And funny enough, my high school mascot was a Lancer, so I had a little giggle to myself.
Oh, funny.
Really?
That's interesting.
It's just weird. Yeah.
Well,
and the Mormons can't have coffee, so they're trying to interrupt this process.
That's interesting too. That is interesting.
Super weird. Yeah. I think they're trying to make sure nobody, like, if you skip a step, you got a problem. You get bad coffee.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Well, something Jordan, unless you want to add something to this, I saw something in the news on Twitter right before we went on the air, and I thought it was significant when we talk about our mystical architecture here. But if you want to say something about this, go ahead.
Sure. Yeah, there's so much here. The Lancer car, Gilmore Girls spoilers, so skip for 60 seconds if you don't want to hear it. But the car gets compacted. It's in this terrible accident, which if JFK is the Lancer, it seems like a parallel to that story. And with this imagery, I hadn't really thought of it this way, but it's really obvious to me now. The Twin Peaks imagery, like you were talking about, the black, the red, the white, these alchemical stages. I mean, this looks so much like all of the Nazi symbolism in this photo that you presented. I think
interesting. That's interesting too.
And other people would know much more about it than I do. I think Heidi knows much more than I do.
No, I'm not. I just know the the Rosicrucian coloring, the Merovingian rose, like all of this applies, I feel. So.
And I'm curious 100%. Too, if this particular iteration of the rose, because most of the roses we've seen don't look like this one. This one has the spiral in the middle. I'm curious if there's a specific symbol of the rose that this correlates with, or if it's just the rose concept, or if we're getting maybe a few different symbols combined into the one that she's wearing.
I don't know.
They always show us, don't they? They always show us.
Yeah.
Lots of fun.
It looks like some very salacious symbolism that some people might be aware of, but I don't want to go too deeply into it. But it stood out to me because it wasn't just any rose, and there's tons of roses in the show. Also, the swans are showing up in conjunction with the roses over and over and over again. So weirdly, anytime we try to find something for fun, like Gilmore Girls, it turns out to be archetypally coded.
Yeah. I wanted to mention that the woman that Madchen, I forget her last name, but the woman that plays Shelley on Twin Peaks plays Sherry on Gilmore Girls.
Gilmore Girls.
And so there are several characters from both shows that are out there. I think Ray Wise makes an appearance in later series, but Sherry is the first one. So let's go to the topical thing if we can.
Yeah.
So this was interesting. We've talked a lot about, I think last time we talked a lot about how Trump is seemingly redirecting or claiming the JFK legacy. We talked about him paving over the Rose Garden and the psychological connotations or implications of that, affixing his name to the Kennedy Center. So it's the Trump Kennedy Center. I think the involvement with QAnon, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that got me interested about this revelation, I had heard about this Arc de Triomphe that Trump wants to build. I hadn't looked into any of the particulars of it, but I saw this. There's a Washington Post article that's out this morning about the size of the arch is going to actually obscure and dwarf the Lincoln Memorial, especially when you're coming down Memorial Avenue, so that you won't even actually be able to see that. And if these things are symbolically interesting, that's curious to me, given that there are so many parallels, and we're going to find even more parallels today, especially when we look at the turkeys that are pardoned by Lincoln and JFK. given the number of uncanny synchronicities between those two presidents and our speculations about whether or not something psychologically or spiritually is being dampened or redirected as a result of these architectural um, restructurings, if somehow this is if somehow that falls into that same bucket of obstruction or redirection or channeling. So I just thought that this was interesting. The timing is very appropriate, if you ask me.
We have to go this summer to the big birthday bash in July. It's clear they're redoing the grid. They're regridding everything. I don't know what the new energy they're trying to channel is. I don't have all the pieces there, but we've talked about this before, Luke, with all of the stuff happening with the Rose Garden, the paving over of the Rose Garden, Adonis's garden, which we're talking about today, changing up the East Wing. They're clearly restructuring the energy grid.
The Golden Age, you did see that release that Trump did about the World's Fairs, yet they aren't.
Yeah, I was trying to find all of that's so weird. The more I try to find it, there's no details.
I have an article on it I can send you guys that I took clear back when it started, and it just said how he was going to do it exactly the same time frame as the old one, blah 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 blah, like just the details of it and where they were supposed to start it and whatnot. Because we did a show and then it went away. You're right, it's all gone now.
Yeah, I haven't dug deep enough into it, but I think it stands to reason, given the continuity of the symbolism between the two presidents, that whatever is done with the World's Fair is going to be another alchemical playground. I see a whole mythological narrative or whole archetypal narrative unfolding with that World's Fair. Specifically, I don't want to show my hand too early, but what I think is possibly happening there is at least a symbolic transference of the soul of JFK into the resurrecting spirit of the space program. And I'll try to build that case throughout today and probably continue it into Sunday. But it really starts with one of the figures that I had on the opening title card about this replica Pieta that was given by the Pope to JFK a few months before he was assassinated, because he also had the real Pieta in a symbolic tomb, not unlike the cave that Christ was buried in, at this World's Fair, and coupled it with the Apollo hardware that was debuted for the first time to the public. Not to mention several other issues that were several other sites or displays, like Disney's Small World, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, those are the things I wanted to talk about there. I think we can get into the content now, unless you guys want to say something else.
I'm curious, maybe this is just a question for next time. Is there any parallel to the Arc de Triomphe? Do we understand what symbolic purpose that piece of architecture has in Paris? Because they seem very similar to me.
Yeah, I think Trump is inspired by that. And I've heard these. I've plugged this little channel before. I really like this little channel called The Coherent Worldview, where he talks about these things being portals and whatnot. So who knows? I'll have to look into that a little bit.
When we get into turkeys, I'm going to have a comment on that. But yes, I agree on.
I don't know if we're going to get to the turkeys today, but we'll see.
Well, I'll tell you before I leave then for next time.
Yeah.
There is this the one you were talking about?
Yeah, it's the one. You can see him talking about the Arch Titus there. Essentially talking about 9/11 in a ritual fashion. So let's start with the content from chapter 33 today. And I'm going to just read a little paragraph to help orient us, and we're going to discuss it. Okay. The Gardens of Adonis, from the ritual heart of the cult, and provide Frazer's strongest evidence that Adonis originated as a vegetation deity. Women planted shallow pots with grain and herbs that sprouted rapidly under the sun, but withered just as quickly because they lacked roots. After a short ritual period, these gardens were carried in procession alongside corpse-like images of the dead god and cast into the sea or springs. The plants represented Adonis in his original vegetal form, while the effigies reflected his later human shape. The entire sequence operated through sympathetic magic by ritually enacting the rapid growth and death of vegetation. Participants sought to stimulate the same cycle of the natural world. Water disposal functioned simultaneously as burial, rain charm, and fertility activation, revealing the rite as an agricultural technology rather than mere mythic mourning. And so, what I think is like important about this section, and it's not really new from all the things that we've talked about so far, is to talk about it in terms of a technology, right? It's not just about um, having this panoply of emotions, that you are actively engaged in the carrying out of this underlying spirit that perhaps in its current form has degraded, has become diseased, and it has to go, all these different rites and rituals have to be gone through in order so you don't catch whatever is contaminating it, but also that you welcome the rains, the bountiful harvest of the next cycle, et cetera, et cetera. And you've got here the John Reinhard Vogelin, famous painting, The Garden of Adonis, illustrating this, where young women, primarily young women, are the mourners who are throwing these images, throwing these recently potted gardens that spring fast and wither into the ocean. There's a behind the chart here has got a woman playing the flute as well. Whereas the men, as this gets transformed into a harvesting ritual, because Frazer tries to make the case, I think he effectively does so, that this all started with nature in general, not just harvest. Men are kind of considered to be the laborers and the executioners with their scythes as they cut down the crops. Okay, so it's just really improving upon this, and I think it's so interesting that Frazer calls it a technology. Jordan speaks this way frequently, and it raises very interesting questions about what does it mean to be a technology or to have a technology.
I just have to tell you, I had to look it up really quick on the Arc de Triomphe, but,
Sure,
that was made by Napoleon, and so was the rose, that we discussed there. It's called the Napoleon rose. It's all
that's
symbol
right.
back to the Merovingians
And
again.
right, and that's very interesting that you looked that up. I believe we looked at some of Jackie O's fashion choices and how it
Mhm.
is it Louis the 14th who was the sun god, or I believe it was Louis the 14th who was the sun god. She had a specific brooch or something like that. I have to go back and check my notes. So it's not surprising to me that there would be solar imagery associated with this arch, especially Napoleon himself, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, tried to reclaim that Sun King title, that Sun Emperor.
I think he did. I can
Right.
double check that, but I
But
remember that as well
I think
off
it's
the
kind of
top.
contained in his name too. It to me, it's a couple letters off from Apollyon or Apollo, Napoleon,
Mhm.
right? That we
Yes,
have a solar
yes.
figure. So that's very
Yeah,
interesting.
it's weird. 100%. Yes. So, yeah, it does. It does say that. Yep, the son of Austerlitz.
Yeah,
Yep.
I gotta look
So,
that up.
there's that. Yep, weird.
What say you, Jordan?
I don't have anything to add necessarily on that specifically, but yes, I do think of spiritual technologies. I think most of my life I viewed technology in a very narrow sense. I wouldn't even have probably included pen and paper as technology. That didn't drop into my consciousness, I think,
Yeah,
until I was more of a teenager. And in school, we talked about that as like the printing press being this technology. But I think about spiritual technologies often. I probably lift that too from Gordon White because that's how he speaks about it. My own mentors, Dr. Strang, like that's how she talks about it. So I definitely didn't invent that language, but I do think we're kind of conditioned to view technology as a very narrow, specific thing. And widening our perspective can be very valuable. Technology is, to me, just anything that's sort of a repeatable protocol to acquire a certain end. And yeah, I mean, we are cogs within some of the technology that other people would like us to participate in.
yeah.
Well, you do
Well, I just think
know
it's
you brought Dr. Strang, is that right? Or did you say Strange? Strang?
Strength. Yeah, Christian Strength. Yeah, that's her name.
With a G?
With a G. Yeah.
No
Yeah, no
E?
E. No E.
Oh, Jesse James Strang. He's very
Mm.
interesting. You should look him up sometime. He was a Mormon. He went and started
Oh,
his own
interesting.
Mormonism out there in Beaver Island, and he broke off from the original church. But he started something called the Halcyon Illuminati,
Ah.
It's really interesting. I think it might actually
Yeah.
fit some of the places you go, and it's
I,
not the
f-
mainstream anyway. So
I forgot my notepad here. When we take a break, I'll have to
yeah.
get it.
Okay. Yeah.
Very
Weird.
interesting.
Anyway, may play in. He was more
Yeah,
occulted. So
right.
Yeah. Where was Beaver Island?
so he went. I think it's by Michigan. It's in Michigan, Lake Michigan.
Okay. Okay.
And so it's a very interesting story, including naval ships coming to the rescue of his martyrs.
Mm,
So I don't know. It's strange. It's a little weird. You might want to look into
very
that.
interesting. It really
Yeah.
feels like there's no lineage untouched.
Yeah.
I know you
Definitely.
you say this in some of your stuff. It kind of freaked you out when you realized it's everyone
100%.
involved, and I have been
Yeah.
spiraling a little bit recently too. Like it's every institution. Y-
I think there's a big reason for that in America. I mean, I do think other
yes, that
countries
yeah.
are applicable, but yeah, the Rosicrucian influence and back to the Pilgrim Society and different stuff like, and why we even are here, I think it's huge, if people read Bacon anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
The
my
new
my dad
Atlantis.
my dad always told me he was a GDI, a goddamn independent, and I,
That's
I
me.
don't I don't think he meant it in this way. He did mean it specifically in relation to fraternities on campus and things like that. But I think that's the way to be.
I'm gonna use that sometimes. I like that.
Hmm.
Samesies. Samesies.
All right. Well, the only other thing I think potentially worth underscoring here is I didn't say it already. The idea that the sympathetic magic and the imitative magic that is employed here is actually viewed as effective, right?
Right.
And that this is the mindset that is undergirding all of this, right? People have not had enough experience. The way that Fraser explains this is that people have not lived long enough, um, and have not drawn on the experience of their ancestors to know that these things are ultimately ineffectual, and have not come to the conclusion that there are mechanical laws actually dictating the universe. Now, this is coming from our supposed enlightened perspective. And the further we go with this perspective, especially when we get into the realm of the quantum, we are seeing that our consciousness and our intentionality is actually affecting things on the subatomic particle level. So in some sense, these people might be vindicated. But the way that Fraser explains that, as people's quality of lives improved, their lifespans expanded, uh, they started to divest their interest in these rituals, and they kind of just became something fun. These little things that we don't really understand where they came from and what they do, but they're part of our
Hmm.
local rituals. Okay, so now I want to talk about JFK Jr. a little bit in regards to all of this. So something I was thinking about was having these images thrown into the water is a big part of the Adonis rituals and the Garden of Adonis. But before they had Adonis personified, they did it in terms of the plants that they would throw into the seaside, and then eventually they would have these little clay figurines. Well, JFK, there's nothing really, you know, early on in his naval service, he survives a boating disaster and with his PT 109. But ultimately, when I think about the end of JFK, he's memorialized via the eternal flame. And flames are not really associated with Adonis, though I think if you got deeper into it, there's going to be some local permutations that may involve it. And what this kind of does is a way to it freezes the young Adonic, if that's the right word, Adonis image of JFK into popular consciousness. And if you recall the story of Adonis, he spends like a third of his time in the underworld, a third of the time above with Aphrodite, a third below with Persephone, and then I guess the other third he gets to pick and choose whatever he wants to do. But he's kind of forever fixed above ground with the eternal flame. And as I step back and look at this a little bit, JFK is not thrown into the water at the end, but JFK Jr. is. There is water and JFK Jr. are intimately connected. I've talked about JFK, perhaps JFK Jr., that is, perhaps taking on the form of some sort of Icarian archetype, if it's proper to even talk about that, right? You look at this Cape Cod Times headline, right, where it's like a fallen sun. Well, that clearly, and he's in a plane, right? That clearly calls to mind Daedalus and Icarus, right? And I mean, Icarus flies too close to the sun, and the great project of JFK is Apollo, which is the sun god. So it seems like there's some sort of mythological mapping going on here. What I did not realize is that these watery deaths were something that was part of the JFK Jr. narrative his entire life. His entire life. I did a little research on this, and in college, or maybe grad school, he was like 24 years old. I think this is 1985. He performed a play called Winners by, I see if my eyes can read that. Is it Brian Friel? I believe he's an Irish playwright and author. He performed this play called Winners with his soon-to-be girlfriend, Christina Hogg. And in this play, there's a boating accident, and ultimately he and the girlfriend drown in the play Winners. Okay. Then, later on, he's dating Christina Hogg, and they nearly drown. I believe it was in Jamaica on a kayaking trip, almost imitating the play that brought them together in the very first place. And then in 1999, July 16th, he actually does drown with his wife and her sister. So this theme of drowning with his romantic partner has been with him since the early 80s. And how bizarre that is. And I wonder if this, it sounds even crazy to say this, if freezing the JFK image above ground and not allowing him to grow old or to descend into the underworld, but fixing this image via the media into our minds somehow gets passed on to the son. That the fate that should have been for the Adonis figure passes to the son. That sounds crazy. I know that sounds crazy, but like I'm trying to kind of reformulate what I understand reality to be. And if that psychic discharge doesn't happen with JFK, does the reality kind of re-render in some way? And I mean, clearly, what I remember about JFK Jr. as a teenager is that he was promulgated as an Adonis figure. Like he was even hunkier than, like,
A
they made
Greek
a
one.
deal about how he's like the pretty privileged boy, right? And he couldn't pass the bar. He kept failing the bar and all this other stuff. But I don't know. If there was a figure from the 90s that was associated with Adonis, I'd say JFK Jr. was top 3. Him and Fabio and maybe somebody else. I don't know.
I find it funny you brought up, specifically the Greek thing because he sure doesn't look like his dad, does he? At all. But he sure looks
He's
like somebody I know.
what, you think
You
he
should
looks like Aristotle?
you ever seen a picture of him young next to JFK?
Uh,
Because she
uh,
has, because she's shaking her head. I'm telling
uh,
you,
he
it's
definitely looks like
bananas.
Jackie. He definitely looks like Jackie.
I could
I
share
don't
my
know.
screen and find it if you
Sure.
want, but
That's fine.
I'll find
I'll
it.
entertain
All
it.
right, I'll go find it while you guys keep talking for a minute because she's
Yeah.
probably seen it, and it's
Yeah.
actually fascinating. It's actually bananas. It's one of the things I found on an accident, and I just went, "Hmm,
I
that's
didn't
weird."
realize there was that narrative out there. I mean, he does
I
look a
don't
little
think
bit.
there is. I think it was just me. I think this is something that I just saw and went, I don't know. I didn't wanna see that."
It's fair. It's fair. I mean, I'll hear it out. I mean,
Okay.
I think in some ways he looks like
It's
his
weird.
father, but he definitely looks more
Oh.
like Jackie in my eyes.
Oh, well, okay, I'll show you this because I found it already. Let's see. I don't know, you guys can judge for yourself. I do know this, I know that right before JFK died, she was, on a boat with Onassis, so there's that.
Well, he was a family friend. Aristotle Onassis
Yes, he
was a
was.
family friend, and
He super was.
yeah, he was, and they were all chums together. I don't know anything beyond
She
that,
was
and she did.
alone on the boat with her sister. Okay, here
Yeah,
you go. Check it out. I'm gonna show you. This is, can you see this okay?
that's
Yes.
Aristotle Young,
Yeah.
huh?
This is JFK Jr. and this is Aristotle. Now, I want you to focus here on this pyramid lip. Okay. This is
Yeah.
a pretty prominent feature, I would say. Don't count out his mother, of course, but this nose bridge is so identical. But this hairline, the way it waves, like whoop, and then this little whoop. Okay, we got like here, here, here. They say hairlines are really hard to to be. And I just, there's a lot of weird sex magic-y stuff going on in this era. This even the jawline, and I've showed people pictures of Aristotle's son, and they're like, "Oh yeah, that's JFK Jr." I'm like, "Actually, it's not.
Mm.
It's
Well,
Onassis's kid."
right.
Yeah.
I would concede that
We had
if
our tinfoil hats on today.
right, if I didn't know who any of these individuals were, and you said the man in the middle looks closest to the man on the left or on the right, I would say he looks closer to Aristotle and Onassis.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Greek god too. No
That's
less.
the old Greek philosopher, yes, who
Well,
had things to
I
say
mean
about it.
the Adonis
Right.
situation here.
Yeah,
And then his father is also a philosopher. They all are, as well as his
Oh,
son.
interesting.
Did
I
you
And
didn't
know
are
kn
that?
they
I
philosophers or are they magicians?
Well then. There we go. I'm all done sharing. Yes.
But regardless
Uh,
of the DNA, whose actual DNA, I'm just talking about archetypal
right.
fulfillment. I find this to be interesting. But yeah,
For
we talked a
sure.
little bit about Aristotle and S, especially I've talked a little bit about Jackie and Marilyn being two sides of the same coin. And I think these Adonis Aphrodite stories help me understand that a little bit, especially since it seems like there is a war between two goddess figures over the Adonis figure with Aphrodite and Persephone. And it seems obvious to me that Marilyn Monroe would be the Aphrodite character, and that Jackie would be the Persephone character.
Well,
Although they
and
seem to be conflated in some of this research.
Onassis definitely knew some stuff. He had a complete lapis lazuli fireplace. I mean, come on, he knew some stuff.
I bet he did. I bet he did.
He definitely did.
Yeah. But what do you think
With
about
his
this? Like, what do you think about this prefig? So something I talk about, I know all about the conspiracy. I think layers of conspiracy that I don't know. And I've tried.
I'm just fascinated with weird things.
Same here. That's how I got into this. But a thesis that I am sort of working on is that when we project so much conspiracy theory onto the world, it actually covers up the hand of God in all these things, right? So do I think there's like some cabal somewhere that like cast JFK Jr. in this unknown Irish playwrights play to do this you can't even find pictures or videos of it where he would get united with this woman that he would then have a kayak accident with? I don't think that's possible. Like,
But
I
we
think
know
that
the
is like,
world is
I think that's
so
God.
random.
I think that's
Yeah, I
God.
mean,
And then
yeah.
the conspiracy stuff, in a way, is perverting our ability to see the hand of God in these things. Because we want to
Maybe.
talk about. I hear you. I don't deny that those things are happening, and I would even argue that whatever shadowy
If you
cabals are out
believe
there.
if you believe in God, you
Yeah.
must believe in his opposite.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking as well. Like, it's sometimes hard to untangle what is demons at work and what is higher light at work. And we know because they tell us many people are striking deals with lower
Mhm.
entities, and those could be manifesting some of these archetypal stories on the world stage through the non-material into the material in ways that human beings on their own could not necessarily say, okay, at 3 p.m. on this day we're going to do this, and then there's going to be a newspaper that comes out. And we talk about this a lot, Luke. That's where I kind of go back to this blended model where there are people who are beckoning
Evil.
intervention. Yeah.
Yeah. Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
but then obviously too, like God and higher light energies are also playing out. I mean, we find ourselves in a tug of war.
I
And
think that's what it is. Yeah, that's I mean, that's the question, right? Like, did he contribute to one side or the other inadvertently because he was aligned inadvertently by bloodline or inadvertently by I don't know what he was faithful wise. Like, I don't know. Like, was
mhm.
he influenced dark or light? I don't know.
And
I
then
do
I
know
think
he ignored a lot of safety. That I think God tried to save his life before he did that trip.
Well,
There were
that's
people.
interesting, right? You could say
Mhm.
that one could argue that him being cast in the Brian Friel play and should have been is like a message from the universe, from God himself being like, listen, dude, what is the lesson of this play? Now, I've not seen it or read it, so I can't say for certain that that's the overarching message, but it could have been this like breadcrumb seeded into his life, be like, listen to this message. Do not go down this path.
Well, and he didn't ignore the mess. He ignored everything that said, "Do not fly that night." I mean,
Yeah.
he was, had more faith in himself than he had in God because, like, I mean, I wouldn't go against weather. Weather's crazy.
Yeah.
So,
It is
yeah.
interesting. I did look this up a little, but I haven't done a ton of research on it. The Adonis festivals typically happen in midsummer, which can be June or July. Specifically, the Romans had their Adonis festival on July uh, is it July 18th? Okay. So, or July 19th, just a few days after JFK Jr. died in his plane crash on July 16th, 1999. Now, next in the near future, I want to do like a full sort of calendrical analysis of July 16th because it is so rich. Something I learned last night looking into this, I didn't realize the Romanovs were killed on July 16th, 1917. I think that's the date. But the ones I have been preoccupied with are the Trinity test on July 16th, the publication of Catcher in the Rye. I was thinking about that a little bit last night in terms of the corn aspect of the Adonis ritual, like the idea of someone trying to save children in this field, you know, from going off a cliff, because that was a way that the sacrifices were made. They would drive individuals off these cliffs. And the Apollo 11 launch happened on July 16th, 1969. And JFK Jr. dies on the 30th anniversary of that Apollo 11 launch. So, what is going on with July 16th?
A lot, apparently.
Yeah, it's a major synchronistic holiday, as I think the guys over at Think Tank would say, or David would say over there. There's plenty of other things, plenty of others those days. I mean, the 7/26 date is a big one. I mean, the death of JFK is a big one, 11/22, because that's the day that C.S. Lewis and Aldous Huxley die. And there seems to be some sort of riddle in there about different uh, approaches to the transcendent, either
Hmm.
through belief in Christ or psychedelics or through technology. If the Apollo missions are an extension of JFK.
Well, and maybe it's not. I mean, it's 77, so.
What about 77?
Well, July 16th is 7/7.
Is it?
Six
I'm
plus
sorry.
one.
Oh,
Mhm.
I see. I see. I'm sorry. I don't do a lot of
No, you're
gematria.
good. You're good. I don't normally really, unless it's something more important, like one of the bigger ones, but it's a profound spiritual awakening, divine wisdom, alignment of intuition and the universe. Like it's this whole big spiritual self reflection, blah, blah, the soul path. It's like a whole big thing, but it's just interesting when you check the dates. Cause I was thinking, okay, let's take out July, and just do it the other way.
Yeah.
Um, maybe that, I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm no expert on gematria.
No, I when you said that, I started to multiply. I was like, I don't think it's 77. I think it's like 152 or something. So, okay. Um,
One last
next. Oh,
interjection.
sure, sure.
Her name's Hog.
It is. It is. HAAG is her name. And that's actually super interesting. Jordan, do you want to tell the audience why that might be interesting?
Well, we've had this theme of pig
Yeah,
symbolism.
why is that important with the Adonis story? Do you remember?
I always conflate the biblical story and the Adonis story, but
Right. Well, it's easy to
essentially,
do because
yeah.
Frazier's going to make the argument that the Christian story is an amendment to the Adonis story. Is that Adonis is actually wounded by a wild boar?
That's right.
So,
That's right.
right, and then there's a question about who sent that wild boar. Right? Did it
Mhm.
come from Artemis? Did it come from Apollo? Did it come from Persephone because she was jealous over the time that he was spending with Aphrodite? There's, I believe,
Mhm.
5 different sources we were able to locate last time about who sent the boar.
Now, what if, you all were talking about all these signs from God trying to deter him from his prescribed fate? What if some of these forces are working through, as we know they do, the woman, the hog, the pig, who ultimately caused the god's downfall?
Well, Yeah, I've not looked
It's very
into
speculative.
Carolyn Bessette and what her name and meaning of all that is, but I imagine I will at some point. Let's go to the next slide if we can. Okay. So, what I have mentioned this, I think even in this podcast, I have mentioned the it seems like there are these connections between birthdays and death days, okay? And one of the more profound ones that I had not really devoted a lot of time to until I got into this into these themes this far into the Golden Bell podcast is that JFK Jr. actually celebrated his third birthday on the day that his father was buried. His father was buried on 11, or his father was killed on 11/22/63, buried on 11/25/63, and I think Thanksgiving was like 3 days later that year. It was 11/28. Um, and then, so what I was like, well, what did they do for John's birthday when he was 3 years old? And apparently they had a little party that evening, the night of the funeral, which kind of seems crazy to me. Seems, but then 10 days later, they had this party for John, and there are actually images of it. And his dad's been dead 2 weeks, 2 weeks, and this is happening. He's 3 years old. Caroline, interestingly enough, her birthday is like 11/27, I think. So she was caught up in this as well. But what's sort of interesting about this, if there is some sort of archetypal unfulfillment or lack of fulfillment that's going on between JFK and his son and this Adonis figure, is interesting that there's kind of this calendrical overlapping and perhaps transference of the responsibilities that goes on in 11/25. And that kind of when he's saluting his father's casket at 3 years old, it perhaps like makes us think about that a little bit differently, you know? So I just thought these are intimate photographs I don't think anyone had seen before. I shared it in our chat. I thought this was profoundly interesting. And I've talked about Jackie and how she saw the play Electra not long before the assassination, and how like it was really uncanny. In some ways, she fulfilled the Electra role in this pageant because she was a very public mourner. Although the story of Electra is different than the JFK assassination, but in some ways she seems to resemble her. Thinking about things in terms of the La Pieta sculpture that done by Michelangelo that was given to the United States in 1964, and the replica was given to JFK in 1963 on July 2nd during his meeting with the Pope. I found it interesting when we revisit Jackie that day. When I think about Jackie, the first image that comes to mind is her black veil. And I was like, where does the black veil even come from? And symbolically, esoterically, I think in a lot of ways it is associated with the grieving Madonna. It is associated with Mary, the two Marys, really. Here's an image of the two Marys. This is Mary, the mother of Jesus, and Mary Magdalene, which I've never seen the Passion of the Christ. I think this is Monica Bellucci or whatever her name is, the famous actress. She played Mary Magdalene. They're both wearing their black veils in the Passion of the Christ. And there's a lot of artwork that portrays them as such too. And I find that very interesting, given that in the La Pieta, or Pieta, I'll just call it Pieta by Michelangelo, Frazer theorizes, or at least entertains the idea that it is an amendment, an improvement, a reiteration of the Adonis and Aphrodite story, which we looked at last time, right? Aphrodite runs through the field of roses, pricks herself on the rose thorns, and the blood of Aphrodite and the blood of Adonis mingle together in the tears. And that's where the red roses come from. Hence the red roses in Dallas with JFK's blood on them, right? I think there is some sort of archetypal symbolism swimming around Jackie here, and just another sort of confirmation that she has this Virgin Mary symbol attached to her, and the Aphrodite symbol attached to her. So that's what I wanted to say about that. I'll let you two ladies chat while I just grab a snack real quick.
Okay, it's good. I'll go off on my tangent then. I'm over here doing math. No, I was just looking at this 77 again, and it just starts talking about, Oz, O-Z,
Oh,
and, yeah, and the link for this and the force of magic acting on matter, which our conversation, clearly we align kind of with this. And so it's interesting because it talks about the journey to the Emerald City and the soul's resurrection and this word Adon associated with 77. And then you get into the turkeys later, and they specifically talk about them being jade. And this is talking about the Emerald City. So again, and then we get to Venus, and that ties in with, I think, where he's going. So I don't know, but that's weird. That's weird. I was checking it because I thought, oh, I wonder if this means this. And so, I mean, kind of came up. I
interesting.
don't know. Yeah, weird. Weird,
Well,
weird,
and
weird.
you said Adon?
Yep, like Adonai. Yeah,
Yeah,
Adon.
Adonis.
Mhm. Yep, yep, and so, I don't know, strange, and it also talks about, the transcendence of natural cycles and them being ruled by, like, fate, you know? The cycle completion is 77, so being maybe he couldn't have, done anything about it, basically. Like he said, the son had to fulfill whatever happened there, and I think that started with a lot before them. I mean, Grandpa Joe is a whole he's a situation. His book is probably 8 times Onassis. Onassis
Yeah.
was at the funeral. He was there. He was there
Yes.
the whole time. I mean, the whole thing is strange. He didn't leave her side, like, and I just think there's a lot going on there, and when you're a kid, everybody looks kind of similar, even kids that are Greek or Italian or whatever. They have this dirty blonde hair and they look still passable at this time frame. At some point, those 2 kids look nothing alike, not at all. And so, I just think that there's a little bit of something there, and not to say he didn't know. We know this is a family that's, got its own skeleton, so whatever. Maybe it was an agreed upon situation. I don't know. I don't know their life. Um, but where you've got the whole universe staring at your kid, it might be a problem, you
Yeah,
know?
no kidding. Yeah.
I mean, her sister's, like, taking her off on a cruise, and he was pissed about it because her baby died, right before this all, like, went down, so it was again, and he was not the best about this, so well, we're getting into sacrifice again, so it's weird. I don't know.
Yeah.
Hopefully you heard
I
some
walk
of that.
away from the computer. You ladies are talking about child sacrifice.
Yes,
I
yes.
Is it-
mean, I was talking about 77 and Oz and cycle completion.
Yeah.
Sure. That goes into sacrifice.
Mhm.
Goes directly to the turkeys, and what do they talk about those? The jeweled jade turkey from the Aztecs, and we get to green, and again, we're talking about, Venus. I mean, I don't know, Emerald
Yeah.
City,
Yeah.
Oz, blah, blah,
Mhm.
blah.
Yeah.
There
My
there are smarter people that have written about this than I, for sure. I can't remember the guy that wrote. I'll think of it's this guy. That's a good book too. Robert W. Sullivan, he talks all about, Oz and a lot of this stuff.
Interesting.
He also wrote The Royal Arch of Enoch. This is a good book. Anyway.
Very fun. I mean, my brain goes there as well, knowing it's not like I have diaries of these particular people and how they felt about it or what rituals they were not participating in, but it's well known that there's all sorts of this weird swapping business happening and various spiritual sects, for lack of a better way of phrasing it. So yeah, I it's hard not to go there in my mind, even if I can't interview these people and know what's on their hearts. I do think it's a bit of a trick, though. Obviously, when there's so much energetic and spiritual momentum in a certain direction, it is hard to unentangle oneself. But I have to believe, I think, at least for myself, that we do have a choice. But sometimes that choice would be to really lose literally everything. If you were part of this lineage and part of this storyline that's unfolding, I don't know how you walk away from that and maintain any sense of normalcy of what you have come to think of as normal in your life.
Well, in that bloodline, he kept losing sons
Yes.
after this. And we know that this has happened before when we mess with the ethers. John Dee raised Edward Kelly's son. So just saying.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't know. I'll leave my
I'm trying to
magic
be
over here.
respectable here.
We don't make it up. I mean,
No, I know.
yeah.
I know. I'm teasing Heidi because she knows.
I know.
She knows how to make me a
It's
little
okay.
nervous.
I'll stop it now.
No, you're great.
For now.
Yeah.
I feel like a school marm here. All right,
Yeah.
let's go to our conversation about Marilyn Monroe. Okay.
Cool.
So the slide that Jordan's bringing up here, we've talked about this before. I very early on in our study of the Golden Bough, I found it interesting that Marilyn Monroe, the very first beauty contest that she ever won was she was the artichoke queen of Castroville. Okay, and that was an interesting insight when I started to think about beauty pageants in general, the association, just even getting the flowers after you win, the association with fertility and ritualistic marriage. Thinking about this in terms of the Adonis and Aphrodite story, especially especially the fact that Aphrodite is an important component in the generation of the red roses, it got me thinking about associations that Marilyn may have with garden imagery outside of the artichoke queen, which, by the way, artichokes are supposedly some sort of crazy aphrodisiac. I don't know too much about it, but I came across that at some point. So that's interesting. That kind of makes more sense why she's the artichoke queen. But perhaps in a lesser sense, Aphrodite is known as a garden deity because of this rose connection. And it called to mind the story about her and Joe DiMaggio. Joe DiMaggio remained her forever devoted lover. And for this reason, had grudges against the Kennedys, et cetera, barred them from attending her funeral. But it is said that Joe promised or continued to do this for 20 years after she died. He provided red roses or roses in general for her entombment at this mausoleum. Okay, you can see it right there. So like every Sunday, there was a fresh bouquet of roses there. Not to mention that Marilyn actually has her own hybrid rose named after her. You can see it up here in the top left-hand corner. Both her and JFK have hybrid roses named after them, which, wouldn't you know, definitely feeds into this Adonis Aphrodite story. So far as I can tell, I'm not some sort of expert botanist, but there is not a rose associated with Jackie. There's one with JFK, there's one with Marilyn, not with Jackie. And perhaps this is just a coincidence, but I feel like that's an important detail. So I want to talk about Marilyn and the drone factory a little bit. Things get a little bit more uncanny, I should say. You got to find another adjective, but before we do that, I'll pause so the ladies can weigh in on this.
Look at what the hybrid is of.
Can you read it? I can't see it.
Yes. So it's a sunset celebration crossed with St. Patrick.
Huh. That is interesting.
You know about her dad, yeah?
I don't.
Dad?
More
Black
about
Jack
about wait, Jackie's dad or Marilyn's dad?
Jackie's dad.
Black Jack Bouvier.
Black Jack
What about
Bouvier.
Yeah, what about him?
Oh, he's Black Irish. I mean, that's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he would know some Celtic ether piercing systems, maybe. Allegedly, possibly, probably.
I mean, just on the surface, combining the sunset. What is a sunset? It's the setting of the sun, the end of the sun cycle, or the death of the sun in the most extreme, crossed with St. Patrick, all of the Celtic, Irish mythology. I don't know, like even not going any deeper than that, it's the phasing out of this Irish cycle.
Yeah.
Or the phasing out of certain Irish cycles and the rising up of the dark. 100%.
Yeah.
That's what I see. Even with the women, one is dark, one is light.
Yeah.
We've got split goddess here.
Yeah. Yeah. That's a good point. I mean, I think this would, I mean, I don't know anything about dead people getting roses named after them. And eventually maybe Jackie will get one too as they create more hybrids. I'm not exactly sure how much is possible within the genome that they have with roses. Perhaps it's unlimited. But I do find it very intriguing that both of them got that. And I don't want to say I've made the claim, but it's hard for me to deny that they are manifestations of this Adonis and Aphrodite figures. How many people are getting roses named after them when they pass? Because maybe this happens on a much greater scale than I understand. And like this is very common, and I'm cherry picking evidence here. But if it's very rare, let's say there's only, I don't know how many hybrids of roses there are, but let's say there's 5, right, that have been genetically engineered. That would seem to make the case, like I've done elsewhere, that there is a divine archetypal layer that is descending upon the timeline, right? Because of both figures in mythology being associated with these roses. Or would we say this is the Illuminati?
Well, quick Google, you can get one named after you or someone for 10,000 pounds. So I don't
Okay.
think it's exceptionally rare, but it's symbolically really rich.
They did name a daylily after her.
After Jackie?
After
Jackie?
Jackie.
That's
Yes.
Well, that's even
interesting.
more
Um,
fascinating because the lily is the sort of
mhm.
counter to the rose,
Yep.
which feeds more
And
into
so
this split goddess.
it's called the Hemerocallis lily,
Interesting. I definitely need to make a
specifically
note of that.
for her, specific hybrid for her, Jacqueline Kennedy Onassis. So, and it's a little interesting when you look at it. There's also an orchid, right? So, and they're kind of mysterious-y, that's what it's saying, but I don't know. Weird.
Oh man. There's like upwards of 35,000 rose hybrids. So
Right.
the
Yeah, these are just the other flowers. I tried a different one.
yeah. How many celebrities have roses named after them?
Well, kinda interesting.
But to have the lily named after Jackie and the rose, that feels really interesting.
There are like hundreds. Although there's some interesting ones here. Elizabeth Taylor has one, Freddie Mercury has one, Paul McCartney has one. So it's not that uncommon. Princess Diana has one.
Of course she does.
Lincoln and Reagan have one, but no
Yeah.
Jackie. No Jackie.
No
Maybe it's the
Jackie.
lack of one for Jackie, which is the more interesting part. So, like you said. Okay, let's talk about Marilyn Monroe and drones. This was one of the crazier slides I didn't get a chance to talk about last week. So, Jordan, why don't we start off with you reading that Theocritus quote?
Sure. When the thievish love one day was stealing honeycomb from the hive, a wicked bee stung him and made all his fingertips to smart. In pain and grief, he blew on his hand and stamped and leapt upon the grounds and went and showed his hurts to Aphrodite and made complaints that so a little a beast as a bee could make so great a wound. Whereat his mother laughing, "What," cries she, "art not a match for a bee? And thou so little, and yet able to make wounds so great?"
All right, thank you very much. So the point of me having Jordan read that was to establish that bees and Aphrodite are somehow associated in classical literature. And I'm going to tell a little bit of a story here. So in World War II, Captain Ronald Reagan is actually indirectly responsible for discovering Marilyn Monroe. He wanted to have like cuties on the home front pictures taken in order to like boost morale. I don't have the exact story, but I find this very interesting because Ronald Reagan was arguably one of the greatest. I think Errol Flynn was probably the king of the B movies, but he was a B movie star. And Marilyn Monroe was on the job site at one of these contractors making these drones. And so when I think about drones, I think bees, right? Uh, and this would, in a sense, make Marilyn the queen bee. Now, why is this interesting? As Jordan read in the Theocritus quote, is that bees are associated with Aphrodite being an aspect of the dangerous and fruitful aspects of love. Now, Aphrodite also had priestesses named Melissa that were portrayed in art taking the form of bees. So the drone imagery associated with Marilyn Monroe when she was Norma Jean Mortensen, I could see the collective unconscious or God using this to communicate a larger or inject a mythological narrative into our lives. So I didn't even know they were making drones in World War II. I guess if you asked me, I would have said, yeah, probably. So this is where it gets really crazy. The technology that Marilyn Monroe contributed to, it's not like she designed it, but the stuff that she was building was ultimately a forerunner for a military operation called Operation Aphrodite, where they took this technology, these little drones, and applied them to big airplanes. Okay, and one of the missions that they were doing was they were putting a bunch of explosives on larger, older planes that then they would redirect to targets. I have got to go through the exact specifics, but you get the idea. So they were using radio controls to control these larger planes during Operation Aphrodite. There were 2 casualties from Operation Aphrodite. One of the 2 men that was killed in Operation Aphrodite is Joseph P. Kennedy Jr., the eldest Kennedy brother, the one that was going to run for president. Apparently, while he was flying this plane and he armed the bombs or whatever that were in this plane during Operation Aphrodite, something got triggered and it went off too soon before he could evacuate. And the last words he said were spade flush, which is interesting given that his brother, the future president, that his disappearance made possible, his funeral is perhaps punctuated with a riderless horse named Blackjack. So the older brother dies saying something related to poker. The future president is associated with the ace of spades and the blackjack, playing blackjack there. So Marilyn
Blackjack
Monroe,
Bouvier, too.
right, exactly, all of it. So Marilyn, she didn't cause this, but Marilyn was involved in world historical events very distantly that would result in how do I want to say this? If Operation Aphrodite had never happened, then Joseph P. Kennedy Jr. likely would have run for president and he would have been the golden boy. And there would have been no story about the American Aphrodite getting together with the American Adonis. These sequences of events happened in such a way that the American Adonis and JFK and Marilyn Monroe could have some sort of rumored love affair.
Or would Joseph be the Adonis?
Right, maybe so. But I don't know what else to say about this. I find I look at this and I say this is not human. I don't think human hands are doing this.
Oh, we have to talk about the bees. I mean,
yeah, tell me about the bees.
You already know.
Well, the bees are also alchemical, right? The bees make the gold for the alchemists, right? They're a symbol for alchemy. They're nature's alchemists.
Napoleon had 300 golden bees on his when he got in like made the king or whatever, and even when they dug him up, archaeologists found this is like a fact, not fan fiction. He changed it over. It's the symbol for the Grail bloodline that we've already talked about with, Jesus's kids, like the tribe of Dan. And then we have on top of it, him talking about Jackie's dad. I mean, that's my guess there. But like, obviously, the one thing they were going to originally name the Illuminati were the bees. They were going to name them the bees, i.e. perfectibilis. So, I mean, I don't know. It's strange.
Jordan, what do you think about all this?
Oh, yeah. I mean, the bees show up everywhere. They're a big
it's not
deal.
the first time we've seen bees, right? We looked at this when we looked at Buzz Aldrin, right?
Right. And you can go watch Unfiltered Rise and learn all about the bees. You know, it's all
Yes.
throughout the Mormon church and the symbolism they use, the state of
Where the beehive
Utah.
state. Hmm.
Exactly. So, I mean, they're definitely leaning hard into the bee symbolism. Even when we went, I don't know if we've shared this with you, Heidi, but there's a church in our town, the town next door, but it's not a big place, right? Like 20 minutes away. It's a church that was donated by the Mellons, and it has all sorts of crazy carvings inside of it, including unicorns, but also beehives are carved
Hmm.
into some of the pillars inside this very beautiful little chapel, which
So it's
was probably
interesting.
influenced by Carl Jung. Um, but yeah, it's they show up everywhere.
Mhm.
We see a lot here, especially if you believe Priory of Sion stuff, especially if you believe in the Illuminati. Like, I know it's conspiratorial, but anytime you see a bee, come on, we gotta talk about it. Like,
I know,
it's
Yeah,
I
I don't
know, I
know.
know.
I
yeah.
don't know.
I know, I know, I know.
But I appreciate, Luke, you're kind of zooming out and even going to sort of the source, if you will, these myths that are several levels, several orders above or before all these different people start kind of using it to their own
Yeah.
advantage.
I think they are nested layers of interaction.
Exactly.
So, but that's a larger theory I'm working on. Something else I want to show you here: Aphrodite is associated with a pantheon of birds as well, and one could argue that the drone. I think these drones. I could not confirm this. I think these drones were perhaps referred to as quail, which is a symbol of Aphrodite, but she's also associated with like geese. So I find that interesting that when I look at, I've seen this picture a million times of young Marilyn Monroe. I think she's 18 years old here. I never would have thought about it as a bee or a bird, and the birds and the bees, right? This is about
Mhm.
sexual fruitfulness. And of course, that archetypal story is descending upon the American Venus, the American
Well,
Aphrodite.
and she starts dark, and then she
Yeah.
goes to the white. I mean, it's
Well, I think
perfection.
there's an aspect of this too, right? Her name's Norma Jean Mortensen, which I know. Okay. I know what you know. Okay. All right. But what I'm trying to say here is I think the origin story of Aphrodite is that she just kind of appears out of the mist. She appears out of the seaside. That's what Ostick was saying last week. I got to fact check him on that. The same way, Marilyn Monroe kind of comes out of nowhere. She, we know about Norma Jean Mortensen now, but she's this girl working on the assembly line, and she just kind of pops into existence. Whole cloth, reinvented.
Her
Where did
training
this?
was done. What do you mean?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe so. Maybe so.
Killing you today. I'm sorry.
No, you're great. Just okay. All right. Isn't the Ronald Reagan connection crazy? I mean, maybe it's also interconnected. Okay. Mm-mm-mm-mm. All right, I'm going to read this next little paragraph to situate us. Frazer strengthens his argument by demonstrating that the Adonis rites belong to a global pattern of vegetation and fertility magic. Across Europe, agricultural customs involve drenching harvest figures or soaking plowmen to magically induce rainfall. In Bengal, rapidly sprouted barley was offered to a tree spirit during rice transplantation before being thrown into water as a rain charm. Hindu festivals and marriage rites likewise used heat, watered seed pots to promote both crop fertility and human reproduction. Mediterranean survivals in Sardinia and Sicily preserved nearly identical customs, with sprouting wheat and barley pots exchanged by young couples during midsummer festivals later dedicated to St. John. Despite differences in theology, the ritual structure remains constant: accelerated plant growth, ceremonial display, and immersion in water. For Frazer, these parallels confirm that the gardens of Adonis were not symbolic metaphors, but practical magical instruments intended to renew life. So everywhere you go, if you're in India, you're in Russia, you're going to see this rapid sprouting, the ritual display, and the water immersion. And again, it's this universal fertility technology. I didn't go too deep into it. The particular examples that Frazer talks about in terms of grafting the Christian story onto Adonis, but I had my own sort of insights into this, and that's what led into this Pieta conversation. Jordan, if we can go to slide 682, I'll just read this. In the final stage of interpretation, Frazer traces how the Adonis ritual complex survives through religious transformation rather than disappearance. Evidence points to both spring and midsummer festivals of the dying god, later absorbed into Christian calendars through Easter and St. John's Day. The Good Friday drama of lamentation, bier procession, burial, and sudden resurrection closely mirrors earlier Adonis rites, as do the sprouting grain gardens placed on Christ's sepulchre in Sicily and Greece. Iconographically, the mourning Aphrodite cradling Adonis anticipates the Christian Pieta of the Virgin and her dead son. Sacred geography reinforces the continuity. Jerome records an Adonis grove at Bethlehem, the house of bread, an ideal site for a corn spirit long before Christian theology. Even astral signals associated with Venus and seasonal renewal persist beneath later symbolism. For Frazer, Christianity did not erase the older religion, but inherited its ritual grammar, preserving the ancient pattern of death, mourning, and rebirth beneath new names. Okay, so one of the things that I thought about when I first came across this information, I don't know a lot about St. John's and all this other stuff. Maybe you guys do. I don't have a very strong Catholic background, but growing up as a Methodist, one of my favorite things in Easter, I mentioned this coming out of the gate, was putting the flowers on the cross as a kid. And even as an adult, I thought, oh, this is really beautiful. Why don't we do more things like this? And Frazer doesn't talk about this. He talks a little bit about how in some traditions they put like barley on a bier to simulate the risen Christ, or things associated with Easter. But this is the one that really jumped out at me. And it seems, when I think at the time I grasped, okay, there's something about blossoming in new life, but I didn't really think too deeply about it. But if there is if you take the old wooden dead cross, the site of an execution and death, which is not unlike there being an effigy of Adonis that is then dunked in water or something like that, and then you put all these flowers on it over Easter to simulate resurrection and immortality and renewal, it really does track quite well with the Adonis story from Greek mythology, where Adonis is turned into a flower. And I would say that this is a pretty strong connection between the Christian story and that Adonis story. I myself am a Christian, and I think there's a way to respond to this, whether you want to talk about prefigurations of the Christ spirit coming into reality and that the pagans were somehow grasping of a future thing to come. I think there's a way to talk about this, especially when you have figures like Socrates that were clearing the way of the old gods for the new one, as Kierkegaard rightly put long ago. This is the one that struck me the most. And apparently it has, I looked into the story of it a little bit. There's stories about how Jesus's tears and blood sprouted flowers at the base of the crucifixion site. I think this comes from St. Jerome. I got to look a little bit deeper into it. But it struck me, and I think it's hard to deny that this isn't something that was absorbed from the Adonis rites. You all might have different ones.
I just immediately think of the alchemical marriage, like St. John and the Johnites, and the Green Man, aka Pan. We get back to a lot of the bee symbolism with this and the Johnites and their whole belief system.
Well, feel free to elaborate on that. I mean,
so the St. John or the Green Man, I mean, the Johnites believed that there was more, like he was more the Jesus. He was Jesus.
Yeah. That's the thing that's kind of confusing about it, is that these Adonis festivals are associated because it's in midsummer, right? And John is supposedly exactly 6 months older than Jesus. Right? It's like, what are we doing here? Why is St. John Adonis, or is Jesus Adonis, or are they both Adonis? What are we talking about?
And guess what color the Mormon temple aprons are? They're green.
What are they?
Fig leaves. They're green fig leaves.
Yeah.
I mean, which is why I found out about any of
Yeah.
it. Like, I didn't
I've
know.
I've
Yeah.
I assume that's a reference to the Garden of Eden because one of the first things that Adam and Eve do is to make aprons, right, out of
Or
vegetation.
they're
Yeah.
secret Johnites.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
but yeah.
What do you think, Jordan?
I was trying to it's gonna take me too long, but go back and find we were talking about green men months
Yeah.
ago.
Months ago.
Months ago. That feels relevant to what
Yeah.
Heidi said.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a
Yeah, for
lot
sure.
layered. And it's also crazy. Like, I was talking to my mom last night, and she watches a little bit of the stuff we do, and then she's like, "I don't get it," but I was talking about what the Bible says about Christmas trees, and she was like, I had no idea." I'm like, "There's so much. There's so much, so many layers, biblical, like, things that are spoken out in the Bible very explicitly, and then other stuff like we're talking about here, just different interpretations of these things or different symbols that get imported into the ritual that may or may not actually be biblical to the text that everybody's doing, everybody's going through, but we do not understand it."
Yeah. I mean, there were lots of other things that Fraser had to say here that I wanted
Yeah.
to think more deeply about, specifically. And I really recommend that individuals read it for themselves because there's just a lot of historical minutia that I've not done due diligence here. But what I can say that I think is interesting to talk about is I want to look at JFK's association with this Pieta sculpture that I've talked about really since the beginning of this podcast. And then also Venus. Fraser speaks about how it's likely, given the historical circumstances, that the Bethlehem star was associated with Venus. You know, we've talked about all different sorts of things that it could be a conjunction between Jupiter and Venus, or whatever rare alignment happened. It seems like it could occur. I would think it would have to be a really sort of special thing for the wise man to take such note of it that a Messiah or something like that was born, not as something as routine as the appearance of the morning star. But I think the implications of that are going to be vast, as I've hinted at earlier with the Mariner 2 project and its association with JFK. Even like I think about it, if JFK is a Christ Adonis figure, just like focusing on the Christic aspect of it, just the fact that his presidency is largely remembered, uh, given the connection to stars. I hadn't even something as simple as that. I hadn't really contemplated it. Like, there's lots of things to associate with JFK, right? The Bay of Pigs, the involvement in Vietnam, uh, uh, a variety of other issues, but far and away, it's the association with stars, and that's really what the story of Christ is about, the association with stars.
Well, it feeds into to the Orion myth you walked us through
Yeah.
recently, where, like, he's exalted into the stars, and
Mhm.
that's where they come from. So I think kind of all these are fractals or mythogems of a similar root.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm
Wow.
still trying to
Yeah.
figure out who Orion is in the story.
Yeah.
I
Well,
I want to at some point look at his friend Lim Billings, but
Mm.
that's a hot potato right there.
well, and we
So,
get back to green with all of this, and artichoke is green. We
yep,
get
Yes.
to
yep,
green with the emeralds again to Venus, and
yep.
I mean the whole thing, fertility. It's just all right back.
Yeah,
So
it is. It is.
yeah.
All right, so let's look at some of these details, and not to mention the association with wheat and corn. I think the timing of the JFK assassination with Thanksgiving is going to be part of what is going to connect all of this.
I'm
So,
trying to stay out of the Mormons, but there is a Moonchild reference specifically from Aleister Crowley to Joseph Smith. This was on my
ooh, I
podcast
lost you
last
there for a
night
second.
Yeah, it's
about
frozen.
corn. So it's weird. Yeah, specifically.
Oh, she's breaking up on us. I think I heard your on your
Uh-oh.
Instagram. I saw you put up a reel about the Moonchild reference and Aleister Crowley and Joseph Smith, if that's what you're talking about.
Yes, the moon
I'm getting a little.
child. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now we can. Try it
Yes.
again.
Okay.
Tell us again.
I tried to. So yeah, he specifically references that what he was speaking about was for specifically Joseph Smith in the footnotes on the Moonchild situation, but he talks about corn, you know, in the reference for Joseph, and I think it's very pointing. I think it's very telling. I think the Celtic origins. I think it's another play on the same thing. I think it's just an earlier one. You know.
Can you elaborate on the corn?
Yeah,
We've lost Heidi. Oh, bummer. I can't hear you, Jordan. You're muted.
Oh, she'll probably come back.
Yeah.
But it's funny that that's when it cuts out.
Heidi's over the target.
Every single time I bring this up.
That's so funny.
Really hate this, I guess. You know,
we're not even going live. It's so funny. We'll stitch it together. It'll be fine.
Anything. Yeah, we're not doing anything. Jeez, get off of us. But yeah, like I think they just don't like this whole thing getting out. But I'm gonna find this quote really quick. And it's not too long, but it's specific to Crowley and Moonchild and the corn and the pigeons. And again, we get birds, and I just can't help it. And I know it's like excessive, and I try not to do that. Because I know. All right, let's see.
Well, just saying what they
I'm not
wrote.
trying to kill you. Yeah, no, I'm finding it. He's like, oh my gosh, not again.
No, it's great.
I'm sorry.
Well, we
It's
talked
just so
about
much material. Yeah.
We did talk about the Moonchild a while ago. So that's definitely like not
Okay, good. Okay. I just don't want to be like,
and Jack Parsons, all of that is.
So this is the actual quote. All gave way to the most enigmatic figure. It was an insignificant face and form, but the attribution of him filled all heaven. In his sphere was primarily a mist, which Hillel instinctively recognized as malarious, and she got an impression rather than a vision of an immense muddy river rushing through swamps. And then she saw from this man's brain issued phantoms like pigeons. They were neither Red Indians nor Israelites, yet they had something of each in their bearing. And these poured little smoke from the head of this little man. In his hand was a book, and he held it over his head. And the book was guarded by an angelic figure whose face was extraordinarily stern and unbeautiful, but who was scattered with white hands the wealth of life, children, corn, and gold. And behind all these things was a great multitude, and about them were the symbolic form of exile and death, and every persecution and hideous laughter of triumphant enemies. And all this seemed to weigh heavy upon the little man who had created it. And so this is all referenced specifically in the show notes, in the footnotes from Crowley on page 225, Aleister Crowley, what he's speaking of, that this is absolutely Joseph Smith. So, and the Nephites. So, yeah.
That's crazy.
It is crazy. The first time I read it, it meant nothing to me because I'd never heard about the Golden Bough. And then after I talked to you and I knew about it, like all these little plugs lights came on. I mean, from the oak, from them digging him up all the time, not just him, his brother, everybody.
That's right.
They dug them all up, like all this weird stuff, the connection to Skull and Bones, William Huntington Russell's his fifth cousin. They come and start Skull and Bones out here. Like, come on. It's too much. It's got 7 ancestors on the Mayflower. I mean, one was divinely saved. He fell overboard. They got him back in the midst of a horrible storm. I'm sorry.
No, you don't
not
apologize. You're great.
Yeah.
It's always interesting. This material is just so vast, and
oh my gosh,
it's just so much to get through.
I don't think people understand what it means. That's the problem. And the replaying constantly through history, not with one.
That's what I'm after. That's what I'm after.
I see it. I see it.
All right. I want to talk about the Pieta a little bit.
Oh boy.
We can get to 683. And we might want to do a couple slides and then talk about maybe picking this up tomorrow. This is where it gets real hot potato from a conspiracy perspective. And I want to say this out front. I don't believe in any of these conspiracies. I don't, which is interesting because it raises very interesting questions about why so many conspiracies exist. When you talk about the JFK assassination, it's something that's really pushed on everyone. You're allowed to have your own pet theory. If there are like safe conspiracy theories in America, having one about JFK is one of them. You're allowed to say the CIA did it. You're allowed to say that the mob did it. You're allowed to say that LBJ did it. You're and perhaps encouraged. So you go to your supermarket and there'll be any number of tabloid magazines with a new theory about who did it. I want to look at this one and why there are some individuals out there that think that this was a Catholic Church thing. I don't believe this, but some of the markers are there. So when JFK, which is strange, right? Because JFK is like the first Catholic president. When JFK met the Pope on July 2nd, 1963, he gave him this replica of the Pieta. All right, this would be truly a portent into the future, because it would only be a few months later where, given what we've looked at with Jackie being the Mary figure, being the Persephone figure, being an aspect of the mother goddess, archetypally speaking, when JFK gets shot and she's cradling him in her lap, it's almost like his spirit is being reabsorbed into the mother, right? And one could argue that the Catholic president is being reabsorbed into the mother church as something. And it took forever for people to pick up on this, but there is one artist who has I want to give his artwork a shout out here, Mark Balma, who has accurately captured this with his Pieta featuring JFK and Jackie. And we've looked at with the Frazer how Frazer talked about the Madonna cradling the dead son as being another reiteration of the Aphrodite and Adonis story. And I think that tracks personally. Now, if we go to the next slide, and we'll talk a little bit more about the Pieta. It's hard to find images of this meeting, specifically the one in the top right-hand corner where JFK is shaking the hand of Pope Paul VI. Okay? What do you guys think about this picture? Do you think anything's off here?
I can't
It's
see
very
their
hard
hands.
to find this. Huh?
I can't see their hands.
Well, if you zoomed in, you'd see things. But think about JD. Think about what it means to meet the Pope, especially if you're a Catholic. Who is the Pope if you're a Catholic, right?
God.
Yeah.
Practically. So do you shake God's hand, or what do you do?
Oh, typically don't they?
You give him a secret handshake.
Well, what you would think you would do is kiss his hand, right? And JFK does not do that. JFK does not kiss the hand of the Pope. And for whatever reason, it's very difficult to find these. Like, if I look at old videos and things like that of the meeting between JFK and the Pope, and it's like kind of edited out. It's not there. It's a weird scene.
Yeah.
And some people have interpreted this as a slight and an affront to the Pope. Essentially, the secular power is not bowing to the religious power. And it to me, if we're looking at great artworks, it does have shades of if JFK is the Adonis, is the Christ figure, it does have shades to me of when Christ was brought before Caiaphas, right? And Caiaphas is trying to determine who this man is, and he says, "You say I'm God," right? He doesn't really answer it directly, right? And this is where you have the priest class using the Roman power to come down on Jesus for his execution, right? And some people have posited that that's what this meeting was about, and that really by giving the Pieta statue to JFK, it's like, hey, this is you, right? That's what's being communicated. Again, I don't believe this. I think whenever I look at the whole JFK scenario, I see like 15 plausible theories about who did it, right? You could argue. People say Joe. Some people, you can say Cuba, Cuba sympathizers, or the FBI, or this group or that group. The system seems to push every theory imaginable. Okay. Like there are theories out there that Jackie did it. There are theories out there that Joe DiMaggio, with the help of the mob, did it. There are all these theories out there. It seems like what the system wants is you to believe that someone did it, and never really, if I say, I don't even know if it happened, right? You're not allowed to say that. You are not allowed to say that. But you can say all these other ideas. And I wonder if by flooding us with so much information about who could have done this, if it's kind of a distraction from the larger archetypal story that's going on here. So there were some other things that were interesting there. Like in '67, when LBJ met the Pope, he gave him a bust of himself, this whole tracking of sculptures that go back and forth. One could possibly interpret that as a sign of submission, like LBJ is like giving himself to the Pope, like, you can count on me, right? I don't know. And shortly after this too, right, it was that same year that the Pope kind of started to, some people believe they start to recognize the state of Israel, which gets into the whole other group of whodunits, right? So I don't know, but I do think this artwork tracking with this world event is interesting. Who do you think shot JFK, Heidi?
The answer is yes.
You think it was the Pope?
Well, it all depends on who sanctioned it, who created it. I mean, I've done a lot of research on this. Permindex is huge on this, and that means the answer is yes, because it's a whole bunch of them together, including the Mormon Mafia. And you bring up the Pope, and who is his banker at this time? It's Michelle Sindona. And who is Michelle Sindona best friends with? David M. Kennedy of the Mormon Church. JFK was here 56 days before he died in Utah. And there were some real ruffled feathers with this whole situation. But the bigger thing is Howard Hughes. And, he owned some people, and he never let other people forget that. And when he said something, that something went. And, part of that is specifically to do with, Nixon being there, and he wasn't. But he was later. So, all of this plays. Yeah.
But isn't it like, and I'm not trying to be too contentious here, but by saying things like this, isn't this in a way trying to give like godlike power to these people?
Of course. But I do think it's weird. Like after the Pope died, he was responsible for the security of this because it was at the World's Fair and then it got damaged, right?
Did it get damaged?
Yeah. And then it was sworn to never leave the Vatican again after that. But
it was like, we're not doing that again. It was a crazy story about how they got the Pieta there. Like they had like this special case made for it and like a radio tracker, and it was going to float if the ship sank. Like, why are we even doing this? But why? Like, why go through all of this?
But guess who was in charge of the security after the Pope died? Michelle Sindona. Michelle Sindona was.
I don't even know who that is, to be honest.
He's God's banker. He was also Hitler's banker, and he was also Onassis's banker.
Oh,
and he was best friends to the Mormon
killed.
David M. Kennedy, best friends. And there was a problem there, and there's some scandal there, and there's a point where the Mormon Church bails out the Catholic Church, and then all of a sudden they got a temple down the street. So I don't know, from the Vatican in 2019. But whatever. I mean, nobody cares because the Mormons are nice. But it's not just them. It's not just them. It's a bunch of people on the. I think the Permidex is like the most valuable piece of the puzzle because it shows all the connections, right? It shows all the specific people on the board now. It shows all this stuff. Like it's old stuff. They never are going to say that, but it's like mobsters with literally like the Royals banker. And then we've got like people like Clay Shaw on the board. And none of it makes sense unless you go, yep, okay, I get it now. Like it's a bunch of hoodlums and then like royal people and weird stuff that doesn't go together. It just doesn't. And so it's the only thing that pulls it all together for me
Well,
anyway.
when I look at all the different conspiracy theories surrounding JFK, it's like who didn't
Oh my
have
gosh.
a motive and who didn't want to kill him?
I
And
don't
it's
know.
like
Yeah, that's a good question. That's a bigger
well,
question than the
it's
others.
kind of amazing that he lived as long as he did. If that many people were after him,
I mean, his brother got blackjacked early. I don't know. Maybe he was divinely, protected to a point. Maybe the goddess energy was helping him till he burned her ass. I don't know what was happening there, but I do think there's a lot going on with this whole family. If you go way back, it goes to Howard Hughes, even back in the day. JFK's dad. He's got, what does he break in with? He owns films, right? And so does who else? Howard Hughes. You can't tell me they didn't know who each other was and involved in each other's circles when it's like that. And we just look at the money and it tracks. Like facts
well,
track. These ones are all
well,
facts that I'm telling you.
I think you'd be a good person to ask about this because I haven't gone into it at all. But there's always been this. I like this Brad Neely comic, the Professor's Brothers, and they have this one
Okay.
on JFK. It's like JFK, right? Like, and they're like rapping about him, and they make it. It's like all done in like a parody, but clearly Brad Neely like knows all these conspiracy theories about this stuff, and they make this joke about JFK being a descendant of Jesus Christ. Now, going back to what you had to say about
Okay, I'll
Templars and
tell
the
you.
true and the Holy Grail, right? Like, there's all this Camelot stuff. Do you see any convincing evidence that it was known that JFK might there it is. Yeah. Is there any do you think there's any evidence that he was potentially related to Jesus? Because that really
So
colors this all.
the Merovingians tie, okay, to the Kingston line, which is a branch off of a Mormon, line. And they've tracked it back through Joseph Smith. This is all everything I'm saying in this whole part about JFK and right now. These are all facts, cold hard facts. Nothing, no conspiratorial stuff at all. And so this DNA link to the Nile of the Nine Hostages, this very important king in Ireland. Okay, they've found that this haplotype R1b M222 haplotype in Hugo Perrego's 2008 study supports Irish royal ancestors or Smith's paternal line, aligning with Ephraimite claims, which means Merovingian claims and connections. Okay. So that's through the maternal side. Okay. But the haplogroup isn't, but like he got two. So that's like that half. So anyway, whatever. And his dad also is linked back there. And I'm just saying, like, I am related to, I am a grand litmus test, and I am related to JFK and most all of the presidents and all of the things that they say, all this stuff, and also many Mormons. So it's, I mean, weird. I'm related to John D. Like, I'm related to the Merovingians and the Medicis and all these weirdo people that it makes absolutely zero sense for me to have family that's poor farmers in Utah.
Do you think
So
that Jesus survived? Do you think Jesus survived the cross and had children?
oh my gosh, this is a
I'm
hard
sorry.
one.
You don't if you don't feel comfortable answering it.
I'll
I'm
tell
just
you this,
curious.
there is a lot of supporting evidence. If he didn't, that is the biggest dupe that anybody's ever pulled. I'll say that.
So you think there's a lot of circumstantial evidence
I
that
think I think
or
there's a
more
lot
than
of things.
circumstantial? Do you think there's
Man,
genetic evidence?
I mean, so says they. And I'm just saying it's DNA. Like, once this is introduced, and here I am, this is like positive information towards the Mormon church, but I still think they used it nefariously. You can have the best stuff ever and use things nefariously anytime. But do I think it was always meant to be that way? No. I think it got hijacked, just like all good things do. But same thing with the Kennedys. Their sad situation when we look at their bloodline and what happened there. But we definitely know this. Some of those people on the board, like what's his name? Why can't I think of it right now? Oh, I'll think of it in a minute. The main guy, DeMorenshield. You know about George DeMorenshield, right? Yeah.
I don't know anything about this
So
person.
so he is basically the helper to our Patsy here. He's a Russian immigrant, applied for the CIA before it was the CIA, like 3 times or something. And he's here in America because he has some good friends here. And he ends up being this very integral person, okay, to Lee Harvey Oswald. But weird thing is he's been Jacqueline Bouvier's uncle, so they called him, and her horse trainer since she was 8 years old. She would sit on his knee and call him uncle. Much like Elon Musk and Netanyahu, and I just have to say, like, there is something going on here. Like, when we have all this crap happening, these are cold facts. This is not me going off in the wind. This is stuff that has been repeated by Jackie's family. And so, like, this is weird, and he's on Permandex board, like, all these connects tie, and you just have to sit back and go, yeah, I think they knew. And yes, I think you're right. I think every Aeon, they pick a person, unfortunately for them or their family. And I think it is bloodline tied where you don't get to be here anymore, and you don't get to say so either. So, right after all this stuff happens, Onassis's whole family is wiped out. Like, his whole family, his daughter just had an overdose of Diet Coke. That was the first thing they said, or Coke, regular Coke, excuse me.
Yeah.
And then they took it backward and walked it back and whatever. But all the time we see this kind of stuff, and you just have to go, what is going on? His son dies in a plane crash right after. Like, come
Yeah.
on, what is happening here?
Well,
They're
I know
taking
that
out.
I know
Yeah.
that Aristotle kind of blamed Jackie, that I think I think he had private. I think his daughter's name was Christina as
It
well,
was. Mhm.
and she referred to Jackie as like Black Widow.
Right. And Black Jack and Black Widow and Black
Yeah.
Spade. And who is the common denominator? And every single time we have a common denominator, I mean, she's always there. And I'm not trying to defame her or anything, but like, come on. If it was anybody else and she wasn't beloved, like, she'd have been nailed already. And she was,
Yeah.
but only by Onassis. No, by a Mormon guy too. But that's okay. That was later.
Mm.
She's working later underneath a Mormon guy for her publishing career. That's true. All these things are facts. And so when we look at very strange facts and very occluded business, we don't, like she said, we can't prove it, but we can prove bloodlines. We can prove cold hard evidence. We can prove boards. We can have CIA documents. I mean, the CIA documents on Aristotle and the FBI, they're just huge. Like, they do this on purpose, so you'll never find it. But you'll get some weirdo like me that can't let it go because I have OCD, and that's going to
Well,
happen.
no. Yeah, well, I can relate to that. I mean, what's interesting, I was going to say something along those lines when we started looking at the Christic explanations of Frazer in his association with Adonis. I was like, oh, okay, of course we're going to bury this in chapter 33, which, I'm sure that wasn't lost on him when he was putting the bridge together. It's like, when do I really sort of introduce this thesis that even the Christian religion is following these pagan cycles of vegetable worship? Why not put it in the 33rd chapter? I'm sure the irony of that was not lost on him. And he's like, I guess there was a kerfuffle when he did this in the more expanded volumes of the Golden Bough. He's like, I'm going to put it in the middle of the book. They're not going to read this far anyway.
They're going to be sick of vegetables by now and trees.
No, it's true. When I really, for the past decade or so, I always read a lot, but over the past decade, like, I got into a lot of reading that I had not done outside of my discipline. Hence why I got here, and read a lot of encyclopedic novels. And it's kind of crazy. I wonder about, like, people like Thomas Mann, who wrote Magic Mountain, and he has like a whole chapter devoted to like the Illuminati, right? It's like 600 pages in. Who's going to read that? Who's going to know? Sometimes I wonder if these authors just write these doorstops of books so they can bury what they really want to say 3/4 in, halfway in, and no one will give them crap about it because they know nobody's going to read it.
Well, because it's revelation. Yeah, it's revelation of the method, right? It's I mean, they owe us to a point, and they don't have to make it easy, and that's what they can do. Just like why AI can lie to us, just like why all kinds of things. Like, they're not ever going to make it that easy. And here's the point behind it all. It doesn't matter what we believe, it matters what they believe. That's the whole point of my channel. It matters what the theys are and that they believe, because we have to understand that to make it make sense, even if you think it's nuts. And half the time it is. So,
well, this is an interesting, it's a larger speculative conversation. I oftentimes think of the book of Job, and you talk about, you believe in God, you got to believe in the countervailing force. And in the book of Job, right, like the devil is an accuser, right? And he operates within the limits that God prescribes for him and what he can do to Job. And I think about that a lot when we talk about conspiracy theory and what the point is that it really serves. Yeah, it's important what they believe, but I would disagree with you. I would say, no, ultimately, what's important is what we believe, because I think what matters is how we confront this information and come out on the other side of it
But we
in a
have to
lot of
know how we
ways.
got here. We have to know both
True.
sides. And that's the
Yeah, I don't
part that
disagree.
Christians, because I am a Christian, and I feel like it's so important and why it was put on my heart to understand this stuff. Because believe me, the last thing as a Christian I ever wanted to do was read a Crowley book. Like, come on. Like, I'm okay with the conspiracy stuff, but this other stuff freaked me out at first. John
Sure.
Dee, like all that. I was like, come on. I know I said I'd do anything, but geez, what are you doing over there? Like, I was kind of like Job, like, what is happening? I was really complaining for a while. And
Mm.
it's just the point of we don't always understand his ways and we never will. But sometimes if you do what he says, anyways, you might just land yourself in a situation where you help some people. And that's the point. For me anyway. Not
Yeah.
not for a lot of people in this business, but for me it is. And so I'm sorry.
Jordan, you're muted.
Oh, thank you. No, I think that's exactly how we all arrived here. It was not I have not always understood why I was so weirdly interested or obsessed with different magical things because I don't practice 99% of it. I don't think it's all wrong. I think like eh, God as a force in my life is so important and I if you want to call it magic, like I do things to align with that, right? But that would not fall into anyway, it's so messy, and that's where I think everyone here, it's like we don't really fit in as many people probably interested in this stuff. We don't really fit into a contemporary, normal religious context because so many things are happening and people don't even read their own texts. So that immediately ostracizes you. But I agree with
Well,
you. The Crowley stuff, I've been weirdly this push pull with it. I've avoided him so long, but in truth, there's just so much there that is a skeleton key to everything going on. I do feel like the Golden Bough is weirdly not as, for me at least personally, dark. Like it doesn't feel like as alchemically charged in this really heavy way that some of the Moonchild stuff does.
right.
But it's been really fortuitous. It just keeps giving. And
Yes.
in tandem, like Luke, it's undeniable for you as you're studying this stuff, it's happening in front of you in real time. Like God is showing you exactly the parallels that are there. So I don't
Yeah.
know. We kind of went on a side tangent, but I do think it's important, like the personal curiosity, like anyone who's interested in this stuff, it's for a reason. But
Well,
it's also weird. Yeah,
when
go
did
ahead.
Christianity become so clean cut? Like, I'm sorry, that's not what it was. Like, that isn't how it's supposed to be. Like, if you don't align specifically with this exact situation, then you're just going to hell. And that seems crazy to me because I don't think that's God. So I'm like, I don't know. I don't inherently want to call anyone 100% evil or 100% whatever. And that's why I have a lot of people on my channel that a lot of people wouldn't entertain. Honestly, I get a lot of flack. But at the end of the day, I always talk to God, and if I'm supposed to do something, then that's what I'm gonna do. And so I'm not channeling, I'm not doing weirdo. And if you wanna go do weirdo nymph stuff in the forest, like I've always said, go do it. But as for me, I think not for me. But I can see, which is I think a good thing. Also makes you less judgmental, right? Maybe that's why they don't want us to be that way. That's why philosophy has been kicked to the curb. There's just not. There was an open argument. Joseph, his quote about his dad, the younger, and John F. Kennedy said that when his dad would get home from work, they would set up debates in their home and have these big debates at home, and everybody was allowed to get all pissed and like go crazy, and like then make them smarter later as they had less emotion into it and like form real arguments and all these things. And so we see them being raised up in a certain way that is definitely not in alignment with anything they want us to be now. They want you fat, high, and happy. And that is the truth and probably sick. So I just think it's been they don't want seekers and we are a problem for them. So for the days.
I'm so Gnostic. I'm so Gnostic.
It's a seeker. A seeker isn't Gnosticism, but yes.
This is the thing I've been struggling with. I don't want to be a Gnostic, but I'm getting around to that perspective. Okay. Jordan, I think maybe we should pause here today.
Sure.
And so if I'll just hand it over to you guys if you want to say any closing remarks. I want to say thank you. Thank you for coming, Heidi.
I'm sorry.
And I hate to constrain you. Otherwise, like it'll just take 5 hours to get through everything.
You're good. You're good. I feel bad always because we have these great, amazing chats, and I know it's hard though because you're trying to do something specific. I apologize.
It makes me feel like the bad guy. But honest to God, in private, if we lived closer and we could have these conversations more often, trust me, they'd go deep into the night.
Yes, it's fun. And regardless, even if I'm only a once in a while thing, I think I make you think about things that maybe are uncomfortable for you. And I think you should be uncomfortable.
Oh yeah, for sure. And truly, you know, I would say for anyone who's stuck around this long that you've got to check out Heidi's channel, spend some serious time with it because Heidi knows a lot of things I don't know. You know, I've kind of stopped researching a lot of the particulars of conspiracy theory. I think it's a thing that everyone has to go through, trying to articulate a philosophical perspective that goes beyond it, perhaps assumes it, takes it for granted. But yeah, there's so much that you're one of the few places that I can go to get information that I haven't heard before. Like throughout this podcast, you probably heard me ask Heidi to elaborate, 10 different times on things that I'm like, I hear the words coming out of your mouth, but I have no conceptual anchor for them.
But I feel like that a lot with you guys too, and some of the stuff you're talking about that I don't know. So I think that's the point. And then, iron sharpens iron. And I think the biggest thing with me is I will always tell you on my channel if these are cold hard facts that I have found actual presented evidence for. Which I can't prove past that. I don't know how you would unless you were there, but I can prove facts. And so my conspiratorial angle has always been prove it. Then prove it, because I hear all these people spouting off this and that and whatever, and that's great and fun, but it doesn't hit as hard as when somebody brings you a document or some information or whatever that proves something, and then you go look up, did Jackie say that, blah, 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 and then, yeah, she really did. So, like, that hits a different place for me. So I think for all of us in the world, like, it's great to have a fun, controversial chat about whatever crazy stuff, and then it's a lot more fun to have some fact-based knowledge to have a chat about. And I think that's more important. And I think it gets skipped a lot because they just want to spend 45 minutes and do the easy clicks and get their money for the most part on podcasts. And people don't want to read books. If you do a podcast and people are just saying, go read this book for yourself, they're not going to do that. And you have to present it in a way that's fun.
I'd like, if you could send me a link to that Onassis book, I'd appreciate that.
No, if you, I can send you the link. I accidentally have two if you want one. So.
Oh, wow.
They sent me two and didn't want it back.
I'll pay for shipping.
Yeah, that's fine. It's a gift to you from me. So, and don't even worry about it. So because I have nowhere else. What am I going to do with it? Nobody else wants that.
I want
it. Stop. Oh my God.
We'll read it.
I was like, what am I going to do with this other one? So yeah, my pleasure. But like at the end of the day, I think those of us that are true seekers, and that is a very interesting term. Joseph Smith's brother-in-law was considered a seeker, and it goes into spiritualism and a lot of weird stuff that goes out there. I don't think we have to define what we are to God. He knows us. Mm-hmm. So there's that for me. That's all I
agree with that. Yeah, I think the commonality between both of you is your willingness to dive into the material, to really read it. I think both of you have a lot of restraint, and some of Luke's aversion to some of the things you say is because he hasn't studied and the level of detail that you have, and so many people out there are just taking, as you said, the easy answer. Oh, it's all Jews. It's everything is just Mormons. Like everything is just Templars or whatever it is. And of course, you're going to find those elements. I've been digging into David Livingstone's work since seeing him on your show.
He's great.
He is. And what I love that he says is like the thing that's really a gotcha. This is my paraphrasing. He's much more articulate. The gotcha is to parse out a little part of the conspiracy. Because, of course, there are valid, real criticisms of things that are going on in the realm. There's a lot of stuff that is not okay. However,
Mhm.
you really have to zoom out multiple levels, or the easy answer is to just align with God's plan and will for you. And that will sort
True.
itself out. But, there is a concerted effort to keep people fighting and to keep people fixated on particular factions or particular groups. And all of this is so much bigger. Whether, Luke, it's your kind of meta theory that this is cosmic forces happening beyond the control of humans, or if it's more, hey, it's specific bloodlines that are very meticulous and doing things over centuries. Either way, we're best served by not being reactionary, by not just eating the easy popcorn that's being fettered out freely on the internet, and not getting scared or not getting angry or not getting overly fixated on one group of people. I think no matter what reality really is, that is a danger zone. So I think there's so much commonality between the approaches both of you have, and I love that you both have different strengths and bring them together.
I love it. I love these talks and I'm never offended. I think that's the biggest verse in the Bible people forget to talk about, right? You're not supposed to be easily offended. It says so.
Mhm.
So I think it's important for humanity if we're going to continue on this roller coaster ride, we got to start respecting things in each other, even when it's completely things that don't align, right? Like
Mhm.
David Livingstone's work is amazing. He's a Muslim and people have a real problem
Mhm.
with it. Sorry, I don't. I don't have a
Yeah.
problem with anybody being anything because that's not your business. And so, you probably should listen to the facts he presents. He's a great presenter. And I think that for a lot of people. And that's the same way here. Like, I think it makes such an amazing conversation if you can put you I don't have offense and I don't care. Like, and if I'm wrong, cool. Like, I don't care about that either. I try to do as best I can to research before I open my mouth or I say this is my thoughts, and that's the truth. And so that's all we can do.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, ladies, for coming today. Jordan and I might have a pressing event that we need to
You're
attend
good.
to, so
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely
we'll
fine.
pick it up here tomorrow. Thank you so much, Heidi.
Thank you.